And today I'm out in the shop and I'm going to go over some quick tips with you on the matting, mainly on cutting and putting it together. But most of these tips are actually sent in by people like you. I think Tom and Mike were out here and they actually figured out some of this stuff, but we had 2 or 3 people send in some really good tips. So I figured I'd put those together real quick on a quick video and show you some stuff. There's a cut saw behind me. Some of the people now are actually starting to use cut saws on this, but you really got to be careful with it. Simply because of the squaring effect of the mats, and I'm going to cover that in a sec. So a lot of people are starting to use the cut saw. I still prefer to use a razor and do it by hand, but let's go and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over just couple quick pointers for you. We have a full install video that shows you how to cut, how to assemble, but these are actually tips that both you sent in and a couple of the guys here actually figured out that make life so much easier when you work with these mats. So here's a couple of things. A lot of people have issues with the squareness, and one thing we warn you about is that it's, this is extruded rubber, so you assume that this is never square. That's point number 1. Point number 2, I want you to visualize one mat at a time. So let's say that you have a 10-inch sluice bed. You're going to concentrate on this mat and this mat only. After you get done with this mat, then you're going to go and concentrate on this mat. Once you cut your first mat, you're going to take that mat, put it into your sluice, make sure it fits right, make adjustments if needed. Then you're going to go cut your next mat, put that into your sluice bed, make sure it fits, make any adjustments needed. I think too many people just go, they take a measurement, cut, and all of a sudden there's variances and there's a difference in it, and that's where the problems start to occur. So what I'm going to do is real quickly, you have to understand that there's a male and a female end on this. So the male end, my workbench is all dirty. The male end of this is the one with the nose, and the female is the butt end, the one with the slot groove. So the male end here actually is pretty square up front, doesn't have that lip. So I always go in, and the first thing I do is I check this end that I'm about to cut for square. And of course it's probably not going to be square. These are just big machines that cut it as it gets extruded. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to use the square based on the top line, and I'm going to trim this mat and I'm going to make it square. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to cut this mat and I'm going to cut it square. So now I have this edge is square to right here. We're not looking down here now, we're just concentrating on this one mat. So this edge is now square to this front. So now a lot of people think, well, I can just go over 9 7/8 and cut a square here. But the problem is, again, this may not be square to here in relation to here. So that's why I always say do your 4 measurements. Because what I want you to focus on is I want you to focus on that this edge and this edge are parallel to each other. I really don't care what this edge says to me. I want this edge and this edge to be parallel to each other. That's the important point. That's why we measure, and we measure, and then we put a line and we cut. We can square up this end with a T-square to start with, but after that we don't go by the square, we go by this edge, and that's an important point. So I've got, we're making mats for the actual Gold Hog units, the high banker units, and the ones that we're doing right now are 9 7/8. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to go, 9 7/8. 9 7/8, 9 7/8. I'm going to mark it several places, and I always do this. I know it seems like overkill, but I go in and 9 7/8 all the way down. So now I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you so you can see this better. Excuse my shadows. So now I've got these dots all the way down. And by the way, this is a silver Sharpie. We finally figured this out. We used to use black and look for the reflective part, but this is a silver Sharpie, and you can use a white wax pencil if you want, but they work really well on the mats. And I think we got these at Lowe's or Home Depot. So now I'm going to get rid of my square. Square is gone. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to use my ruler, and I'm going to put my edge right on the dots and I want to cut that. A lot of times I just go in anyways and just put a line for visual reference. Now my line is right on top of my dots, and I'm going to put my blade here, and I'm going to hold my blade, and I'm going to make sure that my blade when I cut is perpendicular. So my hand is square, my blade is square. It's not leaning over when I cut. That's a mistake people make. They lean it over, but I want a nice square cut. So I'm going to make sure that this is right on that line. And all I'm going to do, and when I do this, I'm just going to pull, I almost pull with my body straight back. So I'm going to pull, I'm just going to score lightly, and I'm going to stop. Now one little trick that someone said in that we thought of too, on this female edge, you have a little drop down, and you probably want to stop before you hit that. And I'll tell you why. Because when you're cutting the mat, what we found is that most of the time the razor wants to drop and it kicks out a little bit down here. So we stop here, we don't cut this edge. Now the next thing we do is we just use a small something. So I can even use another Sharpie. I want to put a little Sharpie under here. We actually use little dowels. So I'm going to use my dowel. It's just a small dowel. Now the one thing we've gotten away from is we've gotten away from the big, we used to use larger PVC. We don't want this huge gap spreading. We just want a little gap. And we also don't want to push down too hard. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this so we have a little more light here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to drop the knife in there, and I'm just going to drag it. I'm just going to drag it. I'm not pushing down hard. I'm not trying to do that. And my cut is done. So now I have a mat that I know is square on this end. Okay, I know that it's square on this end, and I know that it's parallel to this end. It may not necessarily be perfectly square to this top, but I know that it's going to be parallel to this, and that's important to understand. So I think that's one of the mistakes people make, is they just go out and they just assume that this top is going to be square all the way down, but you can't do that. You really need to cut one mat, put it in, and go to the next one. So now I have a mat and I'm ready to go with it. Same thing on the scrubber, but I want to show you a little trick on the scrubber we learned. So, I'll get a smaller piece of scrubber matting here. What you want to do, same thing, you want to turn it over, and we're going to square up this end right here based on the male end. So I'm going to assume that this is square. It's a little bit off, but the same thing. I'm going to go in and I'm going to go 9 7/8, 9 7/8, marking it all the way down, marking it all the way down. And again, this seems like a little overkill with the dots. I like to do a lot of measurements just to be safe. And I'm going to line up all those dots and draw my line. Same thing on the scrubber mat. Now on the scrubber mat, I will tell you what we've learned is, because it has that big edge under it, sometimes it wants to roll around a little bit. So when we're making our initial cut, we just put something under here just to sort of keep it flat. That helps a lot. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to put this ruler right on the line. And I want to cut the line. I just want to score it. I don't want to cut it. Same thing. I'm just going to come across and I'm just going to score, and I'm going to stop right before that little drop off. Come up under it. Just give me a little space. Don't press down too hard. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in. I'm just going to trace that line that I made. So I'm just going to trace the line. Again, I'm going to keep my knife perpendicular to this mat, and I'm not going to push down and get a huge separation here. I'm just going to let the blade fall in and do the work by itself. Alright, so now I have my mat. So now I've got my mat. I know that these two ends are parallel to each other, not necessarily in relation to this square. This really doesn't matter because there's a lot of give when you put these mats together. There's a lot of playroom in there, but I really like to see these two ends parallel to each other. Alrighty, so I'm going to go over another great tip, and I'm sorry about the change of lighting, but this light over here just decided to burn out, so we're going to have to deal with it this way. But when you're putting these mats together, and this is probably one of my favorite tips that I've had someone send in to me. These mats are made with very tight tolerances. So this male end is 1/100th of an inch smaller than this female end. And it's designed that way so that they go in and they fit pretty tight. But sometimes, and this end fits in really nice right there, you can see it, but sometimes these mats don't want to go together real easily. You might have to struggle with them. So this is a brilliant idea that someone came up with, and it's just a matter of, all we're doing is, if you have any mats that don't want to go together and you're struggling with that, you always do a test run with it before you glue. All you do is just run something down just to take a little hair off that top edge, off that bull end. So what I'm going to do is this top edge right here, this nose right here, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to round that down a little bit if I have it too tight. And there's a couple ways to do it. Let's see, I think Sam set this in, and what he does is he just takes this and he just runs it along this and takes a little bit off, and like a 1/16 of an inch, and then his mats go together real nicely. We also, Tom here I think, also did it with a razor. He just laid it on here and he just shaves just a little 1/16 of an inch. But my favorite trick was this, and I thought of this. This is a vegetable peeler. And well, all I do is I just put it on the edge of a table like this. I put it on the edge of a table like this. Let me zoom in for you so you can see this, because this is just too cool here. So all he does is he's going to take it, here we go, and we just lay this on here, and all he's doing is he's just taking a little 1/16 of an inch off the mat. So that's what he's taking off. It's a little strip. He's just taking off that little butt nose. So now, when you go to put your mats together, all of a sudden, they just want to just sort of just pop into place real easily. And that's a great tip. That was phenomenal. So now that my mats are together, and I know for a fact that these edges are going to be, because this is the way I cut them, these edges are going to be parallel to each other, and that's the most important point on your mats. I want you to understand. I sort of want you to forget about this top edge when you're making them. Is this square, because the mats have a bunch of give to them, and they don't have to be perfectly lined up. And even the sides, if you have a small gap on here, that's fine, because you do the side tape on it. But those are just a couple of quick tips that make your life a whole lot easier. So anyways, I hope that helped you out today, guys. Those little tips, keep sending them in to us. They really work well. And if we get any more, we'll post them up for you. Thanks again.